seconds left.
Evans for three. Got him all! Shot clock off, 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. And goal!
Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network, getting into a fresh show here on whatever podcast platform you frequent or on YouTube. Talking Cats with Russ Eltman. You can catch the show there. And we are presented by Bet Online, which is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Even if your bracket is busted, Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with a free Sweet 16 bracket and live betting on every remaining tournament game with the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to MLB, NHL, and MMA. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source, from every Cinderella story to every hat trick. Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here, and here with you all on the show is my co-host Neil Meyer of Rivals Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com, and I'm your host, Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. Check out all of our work at those two spots, and we have a fun show, information-filled show coming your way, including the latest on transfer basketball contact out of UC. No Cincinnati players have entered the portal yet. We'll discuss that. And the latest with the college basketball crown tournament. Cincinnati, the second betting favorites, depending on which site you look at. FanDuel has them at the number one betting favorite, and Bet Online has them mixed in there right at the top of odds as well on their odds board for the college basketball crown, right up there with Boise State, Nebraska, USC, some of the top betting favorites in the college basketball crown tournament. We will discuss that along with the latest on UC football, back at it from spring break on Wednesday. And I was able to catch up with Joe Royer after Wednesday's practice. We'll give a highlight from that conversation. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. We'll take a quick break here and get into the show after these messages on the Bearcat Blitz podcast, presented by Bet Online. Neil, transfer contact continues from Cincinnati Bearcats basketball. They have talked to a decent amount of guys so far and made their first big man contact. I think we can start there with this show in recent days. Rutgers, former Rutgers big man, well, maybe current Rutgers big man, still on the roster, but searching for different options. Lathan Somerville, 6'10", 275 pounds. Freshman season went pretty solid. Started nearly half the games and posted about 8 points and 4 rebounds on 50% shooting. And he has been contacted, according to On Three's Joe Tipton by Cincinnati. Some other names of note: Jonathan Powell, former Dayton native, still Dayton native, has been recruited by Cincinnati in the past. West Virginia freshman year, he played very well and has in Cincinnati contact and interest once again. Jaden Reed from South Florida up there as well. And I believe those are the top names of note, Neil, that Cincinnati has reached out to in the days since we last discussed the transfer portal on Monday. On Monday. So interesting names of note. Cameron McDowell, I'm not sure if we touched on him as well. The combo guard, 6'6" guard, number 2 leading scorer at the Division II level last year for Northwest Oklahoma. 51% shooting, 39% from 3. Absolutely lit it up from 3. Neil, it seems like there's been an emphasis to kind of get in contact with some of the more backcourt focused players. And then now we've seen that first front court interest pop up as Cincinnati may have to completely reshape that if Arrington Page is not part of the roster and he enters the transfer portal. They really only, Neil, have one big guy in the fold, and that's Tyler McKinley.
Yeah, absolutely. And too, Russ, it's worth noting.
Well, and Dylan Mitchell, I will say that, but he's more of a, swing man between the backcourt and front court.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, Russ, as we film this on March 27th, obviously we're about a week away from the crown. Sources have indicated to us over at the Rivals site that every player on the roster has been at the last few voluntary practices heading into the crown. So that's a positive thing to note about. So right now there's no portal entries for Cincinnati, but it's great to see that they are out there reaching out because obviously, Connor Hickman, his eligibility is up. Now, I believe they're still trying to seek for that medical hardship waiver after missing time with the injury, but you're seeing them reach out to guards in that aspect because Cincinnati desperately needed another ball carrier this year, right? In the front court, Connor Hickman's injury hurt them in a lot of ways more than anticipated. And then CJ Frederick was also battling injuries. Those are two guys who are going to be not in the picture next year. And then Simas Lukosius and Aziz Bandego walked on graduation or on senior day. So they will be out of eligibility as well. So overall, they're looking at that backcourt position for some help there. But then to see the biggest interest for me, Russ, was Lathan Somerville, like you mentioned, from Rutgers. And the reason that being is Cincinnati has desperately needed a big body 5-man in the front court or in the back. Yeah, the front court there. Obviously, that is a huge name to keep an eye on because everybody knows Russ too. Aziz Bandego gave you your shot blocking. Outside of that, if Arrington Page elects to come back or whatever he decides to do, and then Tyler McKinley, the depth there in the front court is something to worth monitoring. So overall, to see that name contact, and you mentioned the stats, 8 points and 4 rebounds roughly, and I saw significant time throughout the Big 12 team, and it's kind of worth noting that he was on a Rutgers team that was his stats might be a little bit diluted because of the talent around him, right? Rutgers has 2 top 5 projected lottery picks there who are averaging nearly 15 to 20 points a game. So when you have 2 guys like that and that kind of caliber play on your team, it's gonna take away from some of the other aspects. And Latham Somerville had a great showing in his freshman year. So overall, that is a name to keep an eye on. 6'10", 275 pounds. I mean, that is a big time guy, and that gives you the more reminder of what Cincinnati bigs are used to being like they were in the past under Bob Huggins.
They need some size, some width. They don't just need height in that front court, Neil. Need some width in there, as evidenced by the dominant showing on the glass by Iowa State and their just ability to completely bully Cincinnati, like so many Big 12 teams bullied Cincinnati over the past couple of years. Cannot keep bringing ACC style rosters and lineups to the Big 12 burly ball game action each and every night in this conference. And it seems like the staff is recognizing that and adjusting that accordingly. Neil, anything else that sticks out to you from these transfer portal contacts so far? Looks like we're up to about roughly 10 to 12 at this point in the calendar in terms of either they've been definitively tweeted out by insiders or there's a follow tie-in as well. I did see Wes Miller is following Jalen Sellers, the UCF transfer guard who missed basically the entire season last year, averaged 6 points per game, but you're not really going to read much into that because he had a major injury that kept him out, I think, in out of 29 of the
it was in the scrimmage game. He took a nasty fall and
he averaged
out the season just about
16 points, nearly 3 assists last season, was the lead player for UCF, is a career 37% 3-point shooter across his 2 years at Ball State and UCF. So if Cincinnati does definitively get involved with Sellers, that could be another good option and a I think hint, Neil, that yes, Keyshawn Tillery and Sean Abayev are going to be major parts of this program moving forward, but like you should do and like you shouldn't rely on, you can't just bank on guys that are not definitively top 5 prospects coming into the college basketball ranks to be 20, 25, 30 minute per game guys, and especially main ball handlers at that. They're not necessarily wiping away any hope of that happening, of them surprising the coaching staff and coming in and being ready for roles like that, whether that be Tillery or Sean Abayev. But Neil, you got to cover your bases and make sure that you have a backup plan in case it doesn't end up happening that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great thing you mentioned that too, because another name that really kind of sticks out to me too, Russ, that when we are discussing the transfer portal is Jonathan Powell. I know there's a lot of history there between Cincinnati and Powell, but the reason that sticks out is he has shown that he is able to play at the Big 12 level, and he was able to do so not once but twice for Cincinnati this year. There's a history with the coaching staff, obviously being a freshman. Wes Miller highly recruited him, and then things kind of went a different direction, it sounds like. But overall, there's still a lot of connection there, and realistically, being close to home is also probably going to be playing a factor. Centerville's only 45 minutes up the road, so that's also a huge thing. But overall, he can shoot the three ball. He's 6'7", a bigger sized wing player. And for a team like Cincinnati, when you lose a guy like Simas Lukosius, could Jonathan Powell be a guy that comes in here and steps in? Maybe. Don't know yet, 100% sure, but it's worth interesting to keeping a tab on that kind of name and what might go down there in the transfer portal.
Powell could be a great baton taker from Simas Lukosius, a guy that can flash between the backcourt and the front court, can give you some lineup versatility and give you some bigger lineup options if you want to make him your two in some of those lineup scenarios. Good note by Neil there of the contact with the local talent, Jonathan Powell, who I'm sure at some point or another wanted to play for the Cincinnati Bearcats in his basketball career growing up. Neil, speaking of careers, a chance to add a trophy to the college basketball careers for all of Cincinnati's players suiting up in the college basketball crown, and DraftKings Sportsbook and FanDuel Sportsbook, along with BetOnline, Neil, all of them, they have their odds out right now. And Cincinnati, no matter which trio you look at of those three, please frequent betonline.ag, one of our presenting sponsors for these odds. They're right at the top, Neil, near basically in the top three of any major odds you look at. Cincinnati is hovering between a 5-1 to plus 400 favorite, 4-1 favorite to win this tournament, right up there with the likes of Boise State, Nebraska. So many different types of teams playing in this game, in this tournament coming up. But Cincinnati definitively looked at as one of the clear favorites, like I mentioned, with Villanova, USC, UCF, Nebraska, Boise State are looking like your top six right now as we stand less than a week away from tournament action.
Yeah, and it's very, very interesting to see what might come out of it here in the recent weeks, Russ. So it's going to be a fun time there over the next few weeks in basketball season, like you mentioned, and football season. Transfer portals coming up. It's going to be a fun time.
Neil, do you think they are too high on the odds board, too low? We'll say we'll plug them roughly as the second favorite to win this tournament behind Boise State. And Boise State is the highest rated team on KenPom entering this tournament at 48th overall. Next is Nebraska at 50th, and Cincinnati right in there at number 55 as the third highest ranked team, with Villanova checking in at number 56 and USC at number 61. So a few teams in the top 62 of KenPom that are looked at as strong chances to win this tournament.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, Russ, I personally believe that Cincinnati could win this tournament, right? You look down at the teams in it. You mentioned Boise State. You mentioned teams Villanova. Villanova's going to have a hard time making a run in this tournament, and the reason being is they're still without a head coach, right? They have all that news and surroundings still going out there. Like, you're seeing all these other coaching hires across the Power Four teams, and here we are at the end of March, essentially, beginning of April, and Villanova does not have a head coach. So that's why I'm kind of sitting there like, hey, Cincinnati on paper has the most talented roster, and they should be able to go out there to Las Vegas next week and be able to win the First Crown tournament. Because you look at some of these other teams, most of them in the Big 12, UCF has seen 7 guys go in the transfer portal already, but 2 of them anticipate to play, it sounds like, so they're still going to have the limited roster spots, but they're going to play very shorthanded out there in Las Vegas. So overall, Russ, with how the transfer portal is opening up, and if you're Cincinnati and hearing the news that every player is at practice, these voluntary workouts heading into the Crown, that's a great sign for them to go out there, continue momentum, and build off that with hopes of bringing home that $500,000 prize in the NIL aspect.
I think they should be the definitive favorite right there, Neil. I think these are correct odds with the Boise State Broncos. Those are 2 teams that were right there in NCAA tournament contention all season long and just barely missed out on a chance to win a trip to the big dance and seems like they will be pretty highly motivated. I don't know if we talked about this. We definitely didn't talk about this specifically on Monday, as the Sports Business Journal reported that there will be a $500,000 NIL prize pool doled out through partnerships with promoting Vivid Seats for the players. So $300,000 to the winner, the winning team, split between all the players, and then $100,000 to the second place team and $50,000 each to the third and fourth place teams. Clearly something to play for everybody involved in this thing, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Russ, you look at it, right? 300,000 divided by 15, and your coach is in there as well. That's roughly probably about 20 players. I mean, that's close to what, 15K for a player. So I mean, overall, that's huge.
That's a good for a week of work. I'll take that for a week of work.
And that's huge, because if you look down at the NIL package, like you mentioned, 300,000 for the championship, 100,000 for the runner-up, and every semifinalist team gets 50K. Hey, that's a profit right there, right? And you take that. Obviously, I know a lot of people are sitting back and saying, why are you playing in this tournament? Well, that's the reason right there. I mean, Russ, there was an article that came out maybe just an hour ago that Big East teams are expected to spend $6 to $8 million on roster reconstruction this upcoming season due to revenue sharing. That's what you're going to have to take to compete this year, right? All teams in the Sweet 16, Russ, they have averaged almost $5 to $7 million in NIL. Think about that. Right? Cincinnati, we both know Cincinnati didn't have a roster limit of $5 million for this roster. But with how college basketball is shaping up, anything can help, right? So this $500,000, if they go out there and win, you get to your semifinalists, boom, there's 50K. If you go out there and win it all, that's 300K. Anything will help keep these guys here. And then not only that, but it will also help the collective at the University of Cincinnati as well. They'll be able to profit off of that. They'll be able to say, hey, this is what we did. We marketed that. And NIL is going to continue to be a huge thing as college athletics move forwards, because, Russ, you and I both know NIL is not going away anytime soon now that they made it legal. But it's going to continue to change the avenue and the path of college athletics. Like, there's no other way around it.
The Crown. We're here. We're nearly here, that is. And you know what? I'm excited to cover it, Neil. I am. It's going to be more basketball, more chances to see guys like Aziz Bandaogo and Simas Lukosius in the uniform one last time, and you go play for a trophy. Now, if they won, Neil, I don't know that you should be raising a banner or anything for this competition, but it's a feather in the cap nonetheless, and can be a great way to get some momentum going into the off season. And Neil, what happened with the Xavier Musketeers 2 years ago? They win the NIT, right? And then Sean Miller comes in. They make the NCAA tournament back-to-back seasons, and the momentum is picked up right there. Now, it's obviously not the same kind of baton passing, same kind of scenario here with Cincinnati, obviously, but there is a precedent for going and winning one of these lower tiered tournaments below the NCAA tournament, and then going forward and doing good things with your program moving forward. So we'll see if the Bearcats can pull that off, as they have a slate of games starting on April Fool's Day. That should be a lot of fun. And they take on DePaul at 3 p.m. Eastern there as 9-point favorites on betonline.ag. Make sure to check out BetOnline to make your wagers on that game. And then they will face the winner of Oregon State UCF in the next round, and in the semifinals would face one of the four from Colorado, Villanova, Tulane, USC. And then the final has the other 8 teams on the other side of the bracket. And they would not have to face, Neil, the top favorite in this tournament, Boise State, until the final, if that were to happen. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they would not have to face them until the final game on April 6th at 5:30 Eastern out in Las Vegas. A lot of fun discussing the college basketball side of things. Let's get to a quick football minute or two coming off of the Bearcats' return from spring break this week. Listening to or watching Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. We're presented by Bet Online. Neil, good vibes around the Cincinnati Bearcats football team right now. There was a lot fewer orange jerseys out there on the field at practice, orange jerseys, meaning injured players or dinged up players that were not practicing. Didn't see many of those guys compared to my first day at practice a couple weeks ago. It seems like the offense is starting to get installed more succinctly and a little bit better each day. The top takeaway once again for me was Jeff Caldwell. The Lindenwood wide receiver looks like he's going to be the definitive top outside option this year, taking over for Xavier Henderson. And I think, Neil, this is going to be a receiving core that's just going to make life so much easier on Brendan Sorsby in terms of getting open and allowing him to get to open reads quicker and quicker in his progression timeline when you're sitting in that 1 to 4 second range in the pocket. Now, Neil, is that going to be enough to overcome the loss of experience and continuity on the offensive line is the big question for the offense. And they're trying to work through who is going to be the main maulers on the inside for Cincinnati in that sense. But overall, Neil, Jeff Caldwell was my top takeaway yesterday. He was once again phenomenal, separated at will, made 2 huge plays that I noted, got a couple touchdowns, made some big plays over the middle. It seems like, Neil, that he's going to be away along with some of the other names like Cyrus Allen, Tony Johnson, and of course, Joe Royer, who we'll talk about in just a minute, for Cincinnati to not only air the ball out more consistently and more aptly this year, but be able to hit that middle portion of the field that you and I talked about them kind of lacking too much at times last season in the passing game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Russ, everything goes to it because of Jeff Caldwell's big frame, right? I mean, 6'5", 210. Cincinnati desperately.
He looks like T. Higgins out there. That's what he reminds me of.
No,
he reminds me of T.
exactly.
Higgins' frame when he's out there in game in play-to-play action.
And he stands out as soon as he hits the gridiron. It's safe to say, Russ, because my first time watching spring practice, you didn't even have to look down at the roster. You knew who Jeff Caldwell was. And I mean, he is going to play a huge role for Cincinnati. You mentioned getting over the middle of the field. That aspect's going to open up so much for Cincinnati's offense alongside Joe Royer going across the middle of the field as well. Yeah. Things should open up for Tony Johnson, Caleb Goody, Cyrus Allen. They're on the outside, and even Jeff Caldwell too, if they can get the middle of the field open. Because, man, Caleb Goody is quick, Russ. He is quick. He can move on the outside. Tony Johnson as well. He has taken on that leadership role. I know him and I had a conversation about a week and a half ago about his role and his expectations and how he's really embracing that leadership role. I think the wide receiver room, Russ, is the biggest thing to note right now because it is night and day from where they were a year ago at that position group.
And talking to Joe Royer, we had a fun 6-minute conversation. People can check that out on Cincinnati Bearcats on SI and on the YouTube page. Just the depth of this wide receiver room, and I asked him about it. It's just going to make things kind of chicken head looking around for all the secondaries that they're going to be facing. Because are they going to be able to double team a guy like Joe Royer as often this season? I don't think so. Are you going to be able to double team Jeff Caldwell consistently and then leave guys like Cyrus Allen, Caleb Goody, their speed in single coverage, the size and strength and hand catching ability of Joe Royer in single coverage? They're going to put teams, I think, Neil, in much more precarious positions. And Joe echoed this coming season because of how well they've fleshed out that wide receiver room over the past couple of years after there was basically nothing there for Scott Satterfield to work with in his first season. And then one more note, Neil, before we get out of here for the rest of the weekend is Joe Royer working on blocking. Just the ability to stay attached deep into blocks is what he was talking about the most. And it was interesting. He was saying that I didn't know how much of a split there was with this, but he's saying it's pretty well split that he'll work with Coach Cardwell, the offensive line coach, on some of the blocking techniques, and with Coach Josh Stepp. So that was cool to hear from Joe Royer, just about, because everybody always talks about receiving. Everybody wants to talk about the sexiness of receiving and just the ability to catch the ball and make big plays that way. But equally as important, Neil, is the blocking. And it's a facet of the game where Joe Royer lacked a little bit compared to his receiving acumen last season. And he has obviously taken that to heart and knows for sure it's something he needs to work on. And that was the first thing he talked about when I asked him what he is working on most this offseason.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, Russ, that having the opportunity to work alongside Coach Cardwell and Coach Stepp, those are two energetic guys. You and I have seen it night in and night out while we're around the program, covering the team. That's a great opportunity, and he's going to learn a lot, and he's going to excel at that position, right? It's going to open up so many things for Cincinnati. Joe Royer obviously had flashes of his blocking game. Everyone kind of looks at his stats last year and notes the receiving numbers, but Russ, he's a big, talented tight end. 6'5", 255. Like, he is going to be a legit force there in the blocking aspect. And then you bring in, especially in the 12 personnel for Cincinnati, if they do run that, you have bigger tight ends in Gavin Grover, Devin Zahersky, Patrick Gerd comes into the way, Joe Royer as well. This is a big tight end group that is going to open a lot of things up as well on the outsides or on the insides, whether that gets the blocking scheme going. And if they can get the blocking scheme going with this offensive line, Russ, there are some big guys on that offensive line, big, strong guys who are going to make people move. It could be a fun time to watch for Cincinnati, for sure.
255 run block snaps last season for Royer, and he amassed just a 52.3 run block grade on those snaps, according to Pro Football Focus. So definitely a place that can be improved upon, and we'll see if he can do it this fall. Fun talking to Joe, fun talking a bunch of different topics with Neil Meyer across this weekend preceding episode of Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy opening day and all the baseball action across the rest of this week and beyond. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.